Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Before we ring in the meeting, I'm going to turn it over to the general manager to go over some housekeeping.
Thank you, President Akbari. Firstly, I want to do a sound check. Can everybody hear me? Excellent. Good evening. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I would like to welcome the public's participation in this ACWD board meeting this evening. My name is Robert Shaver, and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public may participate in this meeting either by using the Zoom application or by telephone. And if you're participating by Zoom, generally we ask that all participants mute their microphones unless speaking. You may also be placed on mute by the district secretary. However, the district secretary will unmute participants at the appropriate times when the board is receiving public comments. In Zoom, you'll be able to follow along and view the presentation materials as they are presented to the board. And at any time, you may submit a question or raise your hand in the Zoom application if you're muted and you would like to address the board. If you're participating by telephone, we ask that you please put your phone on mute to assure the best sound quality for everyone. And again, the board president will request you to make any comments should you have any at the appropriate time. We do record our board meetings and they will be made accessible to the public for future viewing. The board has 3 closed session items that will be covered near the end of the meeting this evening. While the board convenes privately in closed session, members of the public may remain logged in or they may stay on the phone and they'll be informed of any board reports once the closed sessions are concluded. Again, thank you very much for attending.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Shaver. With that, at 6:02, I'm going to call this meeting to order, and I'm going to ask our district secretary to take roll call, please.
Sure. Directors Weed.
Here.
Okay, thank you, Director Weed. Gunther.
Here.
Huang.
Here.
Sethi. And Akbari.
Here. And I'm going to note for the record that Director Sethi let the board know that he's going to be a few minutes late this evening. And I'll ask the district secretary to just let us know when Director Sethi joins, and we'll make sure that it's reflected in the minutes. With that, let's do the salute to the flag, and I'll ask Director Gunther to lead us today.
Very good. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Director Gunther. And with that, we will move on to item number 3, public comments. Members of the public may address the board on any issues not listed on the agenda, which are within the purview of the Alameda County Water District. A 5-minute limit is customary. However, the board president may adjust the actual time allotted to accommodate the number of speakers. Members of the public who wish to address the board on a scheduled agenda item will be given the opportunity to do so. With that, I'm going to open it up for public comments. If you wish to make a comment, please let us know by taking yourself on mute or by raising your hand in the Zoom app. Seeing or hearing none, I am going to take that to mean we have no public comments. And with that, I'll close item number 3 and move on to item number 4, the consent calendar. And I see that Director Sethi has joined us, so let us reflect that in the minutes. Is there anyone who wishes to make an amendment to the consent calendar?
Yes, Director Sethi here. I need to remove myself from consideration of the consent item 5.4 because I'm involved in the development of that property on Washington Boulevard. So I'm going to recuse myself right now and leave the room momentarily once again until you've finished here, okay?
Sorry, Director Sethi, I think maybe we should first make a motion to move items 5.1 to 5.3 to the consent calendar, and then we can move to 5.4.
I will make the motion to add items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3 to the consent calendar, please.
I will second the motion.
President Akbari, you
Yes,
asked for amendments to the consent calendar, so that's why I mentioned I need to recuse myself right now because I'm involved in the development of that property. So I'm going to recuse myself right now and leave the room, okay?
So if I could jump in, Director Sethi, item 5.4 is not being taken up right at this point. So you don't need to recuse yourself from the action to add items 5.1 to 5.3 to the consent calendar, or from the approving the consent calendar. And then after that's done, then you can recuse yourself and the board will take up item 5.4 at that time.
Okay, you give me the instruction to when to leave.
Okay, perfect.
thank you, Pat. So I think we have a motion and a second on the amended consent calendar. Can we have roll call, please?
Sure. Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Abstain.
and Akbari.
Aye. Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar as amended?
I'll move that we adopt consent calendar as amended.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll
Okay.
call, please.
Sure. Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Abstain.
and Akbari.
Aye. With that, we'll move to item 5.4, and Director Sethi, I think it might be a good opportunity for you to recuse yourself.
Correct. Now is the time.
Okay. I will leave the room for about 2 minutes, okay? I assume you can resume the meeting within 2 minutes here.
Or do you?
Unless the district secretary can move you into a virtual room in Zoom.
Yes, I was going to move Director Sethi over to the quote closed session room until you have discussed item 5.4. So I'm moving him right now.
All right.
This is John Weed. It might be best for us to call Director Sethi when this item is comes back on, so he can come back to the video conference.
Yes, we'll be able to add him back into the broader board meeting as soon as we're done
By
with the
cell
item.
phone. I'm suggesting a cell phone.
I'll just come back in 1 minute, okay?
Well, this may take a little bit longer.
Oh, okay. So you're welcome to give me a call at home. 510-656-4075.
All right.
Okay, so I understand that you're physically going to leave the room, Director Sethi, and then we'll give you a call when it's time to rejoin.
I
Or
believe
have you put him in the breakout room, Andy?
Yeah, sorry for the interruption, Bob. I actually moved him to the closed session and I can bring him back to the open session when discussion has ended.
Yeah, and that's fine. And just to double make sure that we don't have a miscommunication, we'll also give him a call as well.
Sure,
Okay.
sounds good.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So
Okay.
let us take up item 5.4 and I'll turn it over to the general manager.
Thank you, President Akbari. Item 5.4 involves a resolution adopting the mitigated negative declaration and mitigation and monitoring reporting program and approving the Driscoll Road Main Renewal Project. And Mr. Stevenson, our Manager of Engineering and Technology Services, will present this item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Shaver, and good evening, board and public. This is our environmental review and documentation and mitigation monitoring and reporting program for our Driscoll Road Main Renewal Program. And just to maybe just quickly summarize, we did our environmental review, came up with fairly standard mitigation needs and so forth. No significant environmental impacts identified. We circulated the draft ISMND actually on 2 occasions. Essentially, we changed the project description slightly after our first public circulation, recirculated, and had a second round of potential public comments. We received no comments from the public. We received 2 comments from agencies, including the City of Fremont and Caltrans, related mostly to sort of agency requirements for this type of public works within their rights of way and permitting requirements. And so none of the comments that were received had impacts on the environmental review, and we've addressed those comments in writing to the commenters. So staff's recommendation is by motion, adopt a resolution which 1, adopts the mitigated negative declaration for the Driscoll Road main renewal project. 2, adopts the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. 3, approves implementation of the Driscoll Road main renewal project. And 4, authorizes the general manager to prepare and file a notice of determination for the project, job 21212. And I'd be happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I'm going to open it up for questions and comments from the board. And I think Director Weed is first.
Oh, thank you. You know, this is the first time I've seen a full environmental impact report put in our agenda, environmental impact statement possibly. And it struck me that this is categorically exempt from CEQA. So I guess the first question is why are we going through this process, and is this unique or novel to the ACWD?
Yeah, quickly, first to address the issue about publishing the ISMND, the entirety of the document with the board packet. Yeah, we have started to append them to the resolution. That way, you know, the board can see the entire document. It's sort of the maximum transparency and so forth. We've done that before, but that's what we've begun to do for those reasons. With regard to the nature of the project and whether it's exempt, this is a 7,400-foot long project. In other words, it encompasses 7,400 feet of main renewal. The categorical exemptions have very, very narrow areas that where you can claim an exemption under CEQA. And given that this is over 1 mile in length, we generally wouldn't claim a categorical or other exemption associated with this type of work.
Well, that let me put it in another context. We talked about the South Bay Aqueduct and rehabilitating it. The argument was made that that would be a maintenance project, 30-some miles, up to $1 billion, but categorically exempt from CEQA since it wasn't new construction. It was maintenance of an existing facility. So this is not an inexpensive process as we go through, and I'd be interested. And we don't, and without clear guidelines, we suggest that the board, that would be helpful to the district to try and determine what the parameters are for going this route, rather than just declaring it categorically exempt, which it clearly falls under that definition.
Yeah, we do use the CEQA guidelines to determine whether a project may be categorically exempt or whether it requires additional environmental review. In this case, it doesn't meet the standards for categorical exemption because of the length of the project, and it is construction of a new replacement water main over that 7,400-foot length. And so I can't really speak to the basis of DWR's determination that the maintenance on the South Bay Aqueduct is categorically exempt. But certainly, as I mentioned, the the criteria for exemption is pretty narrow.
Okay, well, we have legal counsel who can review this in more detail and hopefully give us some guidance on when we trigger it and when we don't. The next question I have is related to some documents in here about needing to remove existing pipelines that are in the ground and not leaving them in place and taking them out of service. A number of years ago, we had used the term, dropped the term abandoned in place, and rather have taken them out of service, leaving them there because they're a potentially valuable asset. And we had experiences of a number of buried pipelines, both fuel lines and others, that we considered utilizing, if not for water, then maybe just running a cable through them, because it's a major cost to do more trenching. There was a reference to an ordinance that required us to remove the pipeline that's being built to which a new one is being built adjacent to it. Could you please tell me what ordinance and what the criteria are there?
Sure. Yeah. In this case, so first of all, you are correct. Generally, the cities will require that infrastructure that's no longer being actively used be removed from the ground, whether it's designated as abandoned or removed from service. For the most part, the district has been able to maintain its infrastructure in a removed from service status so that it could be reused if needed, but that takes an exception to the city's ordinances. And in this case, it's the city of Fremont, and it's an ordinance that requires that infrastructure that's being removed from service that's less than 7 feet deep needs to be removed from the ground. And the idea there is that it doesn't interfere with other utilities and infrastructure within the right of way. But I will say for this project, we did negotiate with the city of Fremont to leave the existing pipeline in the ground so that it could be reused for other purposes, as you suggest. Now but I'll also add that, and I think you probably saw some discussion from perhaps the engineering and technology notes that talked about this topic. And I will say that there's a trend toward no longer allowing that. But for this project, that has been approved, leaving the existing infrastructure in the ground.
Excellent. And then, as we just showed on the Alvarado Niles, which a pipeline which could potentially be reused for returning recycled water toward quarry lakes, there's potential rehabilitation of many of these pipes for future use at extraordinary savings and costs. Then the second issue, and I would encourage us to work with the city and do some pushback, is the concept of a parallel system of not purple pipe, but rather less than potable water that can be used for fire flows and irrigation. At extraordinary savings in the cost of water to the consumers in the area. So having the dual systems, particularly if they're adjacent to each other, is a positive thing. The next is the city of Fremont is now doing an easement for public use. Do they still apply the same, rather than taking a dedicated public right of way? They've been doing that since 2007. Does their ordinance also apply to these easements for public use?
So yeah, the city's ordinance related, I'm assuming you mean the ordinance is related to the fate of infrastructure that's being removed from service.
They have control in a public right of way, but they're not taking right of way in new developments.
Right, understood. This particular right of way, of course, is not right of way by easement. This is the, I guess I'd say, the pre-2007 version of the right of way. And you're right, the city of Fremont with new developments post 2007 has been claiming, I guess, recording right of way by roadway easement, essentially. But in this case, that doesn't apply. This is obviously pre-2007 right of way.
I understand in this specific case, but I was probably extending on to the argument on the issue of city, and each city has a different ordinance. Do these ordinances also exist in the cities of Newark and Union City?
Yeah, each city has its own set of ordinances that has to do with utilities, and they're generally along the same lines. But I will, like I say, the trend is toward sort of enforcing those provisions of the ordinances. But I will add that we're under continuing discussion on those topics with each of the cities.
Okay, and I would argue also, as a public utility in a special district, those ordinances don't apply to us. If we declare that it's our asset, even if not in service. They might do it for a private ordinance, but would not have, this would be a question for the city, for our attorney, that the city really is not in a position to direct us to remove any of our assets from a roadway, whether it be an easement or public right of way.
Yeah, I think that would be a topic we'd have to explore further to confirm.
Thank you. I support the motion as drafted.
If I could just jump in, since Director Weed mentioned legal review of the environmental documents, I did just want to let the board know that we did have our environmental counsel review kind of the process and whether categorical exemptions applied to this particular project. And the recommendation was to support the idea of going forward with an ISMND. This is not an EIR, it's an initial study mitigated negative declaration. And some of the other things to think about is there are exceptions to the exemption. So you need to look at the project overall. And even though an exemption may apply, there may be exceptions to the exemption because of certain environmental risks. So just wanted to let the board know that we did have our environmental counsel look at this, and so he supported this particular way to proceed.
Thank you. Do we have any idea how much it cost us to do the environmental preparation in the document?
I would need to go and take a look. Of course, each one is different with regard to the type of environmental review required, but I would say it's on the order of $20,000 to $30,000.
Okay, and a project of this scale and size, that's not a major issue. But again, we have a engineering committee that can review it in more detail. So thank you.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, if I may, President Akbari. So what I think I was going to recommend is that staff will review our interpretation of the CEQA thresholds for categorical and statutory exemptions, review it with the Engineering and Information Technology Committee, and then you'll have that information available to you. And then just as an aside, regarding the DWR, South Bay Aqueduct work, in this round of maintenance that they're doing, it primarily involves accessing the aqueduct pipeline along its alignment through existing personnel access locations, and then from inside the pipeline installing WECO seals, which are intended to provide a more resilient pipeline. And the district has installed a WECO seal that I'm aware of, at least one, probably several in the past for our own pipelines. And we did not do any additional CEQA work for that as well. So it's pretty consistent with what we have done in the past as well.
If I could add just quick vignette or side story. When we were talking about South Bay Aqueduct, we were talking about I was even a discussion of putting a full new liner in the aqueduct, which would be a major project, and talking as much as $1 billion. Again, the argument was it was exempt, but cargo went out one weekend and rolled up and put a liner in their 22-inch line that crosses the bay. Wrapped up the work in a few days, or in a week or two, and drove away with the argument that it was exempt from CEQA because it was maintenance. And by the time the authorities became aware of what had been taking place and putting another potentially potable pipeline across the bay, which the no-growthers would have some concern with, the project had been completed. So there's some flexibility here, and I encourage you when you go to the engineering committee to discuss the full parameters and rational actions the board could take and the district could take that are well within our rights. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Director Weed. I'm going to see if there are any other questions or comments from our directors. Hearing none, I will open it up to members of the public. Does any member of the public wish to make a comment or ask a question on this item? Seeing and hearing none, I believe there's a staff recommendation. Is there a motion on the table?
I'll move staff recommendation on item 5.4.
I'll second.
Perfect. Roll call, please.
Sure. Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi, and Akbari.
Aye. Thank you. And before we move on to item 5.5, let's give Director Sethi a moment to return. Great. I believe Director Sethi has returned.
Yes, and President Akbari, if I may, I would like to clarify for the audience here. I was recusing myself because of a property conflict at 2950 Washington Boulevard. That's the location of the Methodist Church. Mr. Stevenson informed me earlier in the week that it is within 1,000 feet of the Driscoll Road main renewal project. And this redevelopment of the property is before the city of Fremont right now. So that's why I had to recuse myself.
Thank you, Director Sethi. Appreciate it. With that, let us move on to item 5.5, authorization to execute a cooperative agreement for the water main renewal design and construction work associated with the City of Newark's Lindsay Tract Roadway and Green Infrastructure Improvements Project. And with that, I will turn it over to the General Manager.
Thank you, President Akbari. It always gives me personally great pleasure when we're able to successfully cooperate with other agencies on projects, and this one is an example of just that. And I will turn it over to Mr. Stevenson again for a presentation on this item.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Shaver. And this is authorization to execute a cooperative agreement for water main renewal design and construction work associated with the City of Newark's Lindsay Tract Roadway and Green Infrastructure Improvements Project. So the district's water main renewal program includes the replacement of approximately 5,300 feet of existing 4-inch, 6-inch, and 8-inch asbestos cement water mains, fire hydrants, water service laterals, and related appurtenances within the public right-of-way on George Avenue between Sycamore Street and Cherry Street, Magnolia Street between Dairy Avenue and Sycamore Street, Olive Street between Dairy Avenue and its northern cul-de-sac terminus, and Mulberry Street between Dairy Avenue and its northern cul-de-sac terminus. The City of Newark is planning to construct the Lindsay Tract Roadway and Green Infrastructure Improvements Project, which includes reconstruction of these same streets with new curb and gutter, sidewalk, and stormwater infrastructure. Additionally, the district's water main renewal program includes replacement of approximately 1,350 feet additionally of the aging water system outside of the Lindsay Tract area on Birch Street between Thornton Avenue and Bain Avenue in the same area. A cooperative agreement has been prepared to provide for a joint effort between the city and the district to complete the design and construction of the water system installation as part of the city project. The agreement addresses cost sharing and responsibilities of the district and the city to complete the design and construction of all these improvements. This item was reviewed with the Engineering and Information Technology Committee on November 18, 2020, and board authorization of this item will help meet the district's strategic plan goal 1.1, efficiently manage and maintain our infrastructure to ensure reliability. And so as Mr. Shaver points out, this is an opportunity for both the city and the district to combine some major capital improvements within the city right-of-way to leverage economies of scale to reduce costs and minimize impacts to the public. And for the district, this means additional progress in our main renewal program with less of an impact on staffing resources. So we've done a number of these over the years, and I think to some pretty good success. And in this project, we're essentially folding all of the major elements of a water main renewal program project into the city project, and that includes design and the potholing work that we normally do, permitting, and then ultimately construction. So under this cooperative agreement, the district pays for its share of those costs as itemized in the individual contracts that would be let to do that work, whether it be design, potholing, construction, and so forth. And then also a percentage of the costs back to the city for the city's administration of the overall contracts in the project. Now, the district would still be very much involved at all steps in the process, but this agreement provides for the cooperative execution of the district's projects together with the city's projects so that we're more efficient overall and doing the best we can for our community. So with that, I'll be, well, let me read the recommendation first. By motion, authorize the general manager to execute a cooperative agreement with the city of Newark for water main design and construction work for the water main renewal program and Lindsay Tract roadway and green infrastructure improvements project, district job 21191, and city of Newark project 1138. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I will open it up to the board. Do any directors have any questions on this item? Questions or comments, I should say.
None from me.
Here, great. Hearing none, I will open it up to members of the public. Is there a member of the public who wishes to make a question or comment? Hearing none. Director Gunther, I saw you came off of mute. Did you wish to speak on this item?
I'll be happy to move the item.
Great, go ahead.
Happily moving item 5.5.
Second
That
from Steffi.
recommendation.
Great, roll call,
Okay.
please.
Great. Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Thank you. And we'll move on to item 5.6, delivery of groundwater monitoring report and survey report and adoption of resolutions relating to the Replenishment Assessment Act. And I'll let the general manager take it away.
Thank you, President Akbari. If you have seen the Disney movie, The Lion King, you've learned all about the circle of life. And the Replenishment Assessment Act of the Alameda County Water District also has a circle of life that begins in November when the board orders the survey report and then culminates on April 13th this year when the board takes its final action. So with that, I will pass this item to our Manager of Water Resources, Laura Heides.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Can you hear me okay? Great. Thanks for that very interesting introduction. And I will kick it off with the summary as required by the Replenishment Assessment Act of the Alameda County Water District. The district must prepare an engineering survey report on groundwater conditions, and the board must adopt the necessary resolutions of intent on or before the second Tuesday of March as prerequisites to a public hearing, which must be held on the second Tuesday of April. The purpose of the public hearing is to allow public comment on both the survey report and the proposed replenishment assessment rate. The survey report includes a recommendation for a 3% increase in the replenishment assessment rate for groundwater pumped or extracted for other than agricultural and municipal recreational purposes, effective on July 1st, 2021. This proposed increase is subject to public notification requirements that were established through Proposition 218. This recommendation is based on projected activities needed to sustain the groundwater basin in fiscal year 2021-22, with consideration of groundwater levels and quality as documented in the 2020 groundwater monitoring report. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this year's survey report and the groundwater monitoring report were included in the board agenda packet, and hard copies of the reports have been provided in each board member's inbox at the district headquarters. The reports were also made available on the district's website on February 8th. Approval of this item is consistent with Strategic Plan Goal 2.1, maintain and enhance sustainability and reliability of local and regional water supplies, and Strategic Plan Goal 3, improve the district's financial stability and transparency. So tonight's recommendation is to receive the 2020 groundwater monitoring report and the survey report on groundwater conditions, February 2021, and by motion, 1, adopt a resolution declaring the board's intention to continue use of replenishment assessment revenue to fund a portion of groundwater basin costs in fiscal year 2021-22, setting April 13th, 2021 at 6:00 p.m. as the date and time for a public hearing for consideration of the proposed increase to the replenishment assessment, and directing staff to mail to owners and operators of wells that would be subject to the replenishment assessment notification of the proposed increase and public hearing details. And 2, adopt a resolution extending the deadline for installation of measuring devices on certain non-metered wells. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Heides. And I will just say it's kind of hard for us to vote against an item that is compared to a Disney movie. So it'll be, I appreciate that. I will open it up to the board. Are there any members of the board who wish to make a comment or ask a question? Hearing none.
I'll jump in.
Yes,
First of
go
all,
ahead.
do you have a rough idea what percentage of the charge will be picked up by ACWD because we're the primary extractor of the groundwater?
You know what, Director Reed, I don't have that number in front of me. I could dig it out if you're interested, but it is a large share our own groundwater that is pumped. You're correct on that.
Somewhere in the area of 96, 97%?
Possibly. I would have to dig through and look. I haven't kept that number in my head. My apologies.
Okay. Next, when we began the process and came up with some of our recent committee meetings on water ops, I remember call groundwater height or groundwater levels and salinity. But recently I was surprised to learn that the extraction wells we have for the desalination plant, the shallow ones, had non-detectable dissolved oxygen, and other wells had significant manganese, which we're having to deal with the desalination facility in Newark. Have we looked at water quality beyond chlorides on our groundwater surveys?
So the report really focuses on the the TDS and the chlorides and the things that you do see in the report. The things like dissolved oxygen and manganese are more of an issue for the operational, more of an operational issues in treating the water from those facilities. So I believe most of the sampling done around dissolved oxygen and manganese would be through our monitoring of our treatment facilities and source water to the treatment plants. I don't think we've included a lot of information to that extent in the groundwater monitoring report itself, but the district does monitor some of those parameters.
An afterthought from our committee meeting, and I was bringing up our next one, but a request to take a look at the water quality, and if we've done it, assuming we've done a full panel water quality analysis of some of our groundwater. Be interested to see what the nitrates and others are if you have non-detectable dissolved oxygen. So that was a surprise after all these years. Thank you.
This is
Thank you, Director
Director
Wee.
Sethi. I'd like to make a comment, please.
Yes, yes, please.
So in a recent committee meeting where we were taking a look at our recontract relationship with I think it's Kings County Water Agency and Semi-Tropic. We have about a 3.5, 4-year supply of water stored away in our water banking program. And I see a member of the League of Women Voters here monitoring our meeting. So I wanted to bring this up, that even though we're entering a drought period right now, this 2-year period is considered the third worst since the gold rush era, 1897 to 1899, 1975 to 77, which I grew up with, and the current 2-year period this is the third worst 2-year drought period. But it's important to note that our ratepayers have supported our water banking program, and that we have about 3.5 to 4 years of water banked away in Semi-Tropic in Kern County. And so I was asking questions about our own Niles Cone aquifer and the containment of water that we have within this 100-mile perimeter of the Tri-City area. And it's just about the same, but the extraction of water is monitored so that we are usually going no lower than 20 feet below full containment. But this is good news right now. In the last drought, we had to lower the water table to do work in Alameda Creek. And presently we have a full Niles Cone reservoir with a large amount of water that's banked away too. So the community is safeguarded. That's my point. Thank you.
If I could quickly add a clarification.
Go ahead, Director Reed.
Some clarification, because Director Sethi is correct. Water banking is one of our major assets. We have over 20,000 acre feet in the Niles Cone, which our IRP calls for 10,000 acre feet a year that we need for supplemental water. So a couple of years. But at Semi-Tropic, we have 150,000 acre feet. The 10,000 acre feet per year would make it a 15-year bank. However, that is subject to SGMA, the State Groundwater Management Act. And the Semi-Tropic groundwater basin is in significant and projected continuing overdraft. And this time next year, there is a fear, there was certainly recognized by Santa Clara Valley Water District, which has 600,000 acre feet in storage in Semi-Tropic, that could suddenly disappear by a direction of the State Water Resources Control Board in the spring of 2022. So it's at risk. We need to find additional groundwater reservoirs, and ideally I would hope that we own them, much like the example of Irvine Ranch, rather than joining a water bank which has agricultural and other environmental interests involved. It's best to have full ownership of your groundwater reservoir. And Irvine Ranch, which is a true enterprise district, discovered that and made that decision a number of years ago.
Thank you, Director Weed. Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I'd like to make a quick comment in regards to that.
Yes, please.
The water banking method or the water banking program was highly, if I remember correctly, and is still considered valuable by the environmental community. I don't think we're going to have any real major issues with Sigma. It is certainly there. However, I don't think politically this is going to become an issue. The state wants it. They want the program. I don't see them killing the program through Sigma. I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gunther. I will open it up now to members of the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment or ask a question? Hearing none. Is there a motion on the table?
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second it, Director Sethi.
Roll call, please.
Sure, Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to item 5.7, resolution approving revised miscellaneous fees and charges, rebate programs, updating the district's rate and fee schedule, and finding the amendments exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA. And I'll let the general manager take it away.
Thank you, President Akbari. Our Manager of Finance, Jonathan Wunderlich, will cover this item, which covers the rates and fees that most customers do not experience and does not include an increase to the water rate itself or the service charge this year based on board direction. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wunderlich.
Great, thank you, Mr. Shaver. And as Mr. Shaver alluded to, normally this item would be combined with the general water rate increase, which the district is not pursuing at this time. And so these are the types of fees that are charged, for example, when a new meter is installed or when there's a field service, those types of things. So the district annually conducts a review of various fees and charges and revises them as needed to cover the costs of providing the service for which the fee or charge is imposed. As a result of this review, staff recommends revisions to some of these fees and charges. Staff also recommends updates to high efficiency toilet rebate programs and updating the rate and fee schedule to reflect previously approved changes to facility connection charges. Back in 2019, the board approved a 5-year schedule of these facility connection charges, as well as annual inflationary updates. And so that's what's presented this evening. The proposed changes were reviewed at the November 17, 2020 Finance Committee meeting and were presented to the board December 10th. There are no changes in what's included in this evening's action from what was presented to the board back in December. Approval of this item will help the district achieve strategic plan goal 3, improve the district's financial stability and transparency. So the recommendation is by motion, adopt a resolution approving 1, revised miscellaneous fees and charges, 2, updates to high efficiency toilet rebate programs, and 3, updating the district's rate and fee schedule to reflect these changes and previously approved changes to facility connection charges, and finding that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wunderlich. And for the benefit of the public, the rate and fee schedule that we are looking to amend tonight was provided in the board packet. I believe it's on page 58 of the board packet for your reference. I will open it up now to the board if there are any questions or comments on this item. Hearing none. Are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment or ask a question on this item? Hearing and seeing none, I will open it to the board if there's a motion.
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Sure. Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Wonderful. Moving to the next item, and let me just find my place again. Item 5.8, resolution nominating Director John H. Weed to the Executive Committee of the Association of California Water Agencies Joint Powers Insurance Authority, which will likely be referred to tonight as ACWD. And I will turn it over to our General Manager.
Thanks again, President Akbari. On March 14th, 2019, the board authorized the district to enter into a joint powers agreement and to join the joint protection programs of the Association of California Water Agencies Joint Powers Insurance Authority, or as President mentioned, ACWD. And this would be for the purpose of workers' compensation, property and general liability insurance coverage. This coverage was in addition to the contracts that the district already maintained with ACWD for dental and vision employee benefits. Because the district participates in all four of ACWD's programs, again, workers' compensation, property, general liability, and employee benefits, the ACWD bylaws allow the district to nominate its member to the organization's board of directors. I should mention, nominate our member of the board to the ACWD Executive Committee. And there will be a ACWD Executive Committee election held during the spring 2021 Board of Directors meeting. This election will fill 4 executive committee member positions, each for a 4-year term. The incumbents are Tom, I believe it's pronounced Cuquet, South Sutter Water District, David Drake, Rincon del Diablo Municipal Water District, Melody Henriques McDonald from San Bernardino Valley Water Conservation District, and Randall James Reed from Cucamonga Valley Water District. The ACWD nominating procedures for executive committee require, in addition to the district nominating resolutions in concurrence from 3 other member agencies of ACWD. The district's current representative on the ACWD board is Director Weed, and he has expressed a willingness to serve on the executive committee of the organization. So the recommendation by resolution is to nominate John H. Weed as candidate to serve on the ACWD Executive Committee for the election to be held during the ACWD Spring 2021 Board of Directors meeting. And again, for the nomination to be considered, 3 other member agencies would have to adopt similar resolutions.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Before I open it up for questions or comments from the board, I'll see if Vice President Weed wants to make any comments.
Well, I thank you. I would greatly appreciate the opportunity. This, it's going to be a difficult thing if all 4 incumbents choose to remain in office. There are no term limits on the JPIA, and many of their key board executive committee members have been there for many decades. This year I was named to the Risk Management Committee committee of JPIA, which I've learned had their first meeting on Tuesday, February 9th, and then learned that it was the 1 annual meeting that they'll have of that committee. But JPIA does an extraordinary amount of work in each of their efforts, and there's some data that came from that meeting I would like to share with our staff, particularly on contingency planning and operations. So I would thank you and be very grateful if the board would choose to nominate me for this position, which will now be done virtually at their next Zoom board meeting of this 400 some plus members, each of which has a director on the JPIA. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed, and we appreciate you stepping up for this position. Are there any directors who wish to ask a question of Director Weed or of the process?
I'd like to make a comment, if I may.
Yes, Director Sethi.
Of the 4 directors that are up for re-election, all incumbents, 3 are from very minor water agencies. The only larger one comparable to us is Rancho Cucamonga, about the same size as we are. I would encourage us, if it's available, to promote Director Weed with other agencies, you know, like San Francisco, East Bay Mud, Santa Clara, Contra Costa, that are voting members on this as well. Because it would be nice if we had a, you know, mid-sized water district represented on this board. I don't know if the general manager can do that with the authorization of the board, but I would encourage us to do so.
Thank you, Director Sethi.
Thank you. I think that's an approach. I've spoken to one director at the Santa Clara Valley Water District who's asked me to preside to them the information for submittal. But a number of the very large districts are self-insured and therefore would not. And one of the reasons that we now are eligible to be on the JPIA of the 4 programs, Alameda County Water District now is a participant of all 4. Up until this past 2 years, we would not have been able to nominate a member for the executive board. And the executive board itself had a number of former presidents of Aqua, most recently Kathy Teagues, who lost her election and then attempted for re-election, and therefore had to step down from the JPIA board. So that was why Rancho Cucamonga replaced her with another director.
Well,
Thank you.
Mr. Shaver, we need 3 other districts to support this resolution too. Is there any way we can do any outreach? That's what I'm asking.
So I think what I can do is get a list from Aqua JPIA of the member agencies, or Director Weed has access to that information, and their general managers, and then send any materials that Director Weed would like me to those individuals to basically advocate for the consideration of Director Weed and request the general managers to share that information with their boards of directors to see if we can get interest that way. I'm not certain about if there are any other requirements. Obviously, I serve at the board's pleasure. To go beyond that, I think I would need firm direction from the board, as well as the general counsel indicating that there wouldn't be any issues of the legal nature. So I think I'm trying to kind of come up with a line is without having full board support. Does that make sense, Director Sethi?
Yeah, well, I put forward the recommendations, so I would feel welcome to hearing back from the other board members. This isn't going to be done just by one person and one resolution here. This is a political effort where you have to make some effort at coalescing a crowd around your nominee.
Yeah, and I think what I'm trying to say is certainly I'll work with Director Weed and provide any outreach materials that, he feels is appropriate to the general managers with the request. But beyond that, then I start feeling uncomfortable without the full backing of the board.
Yeah, so I'm asking, how does the rest of the board feel here in authorizing the general manager to do some outreach with some other water districts?
I guess I could,
Sure.
I guess I could say I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I don't know. I mean, we've seen some stuff like this come by us in the past. I was gonna get ready to move item 5.8 before he changes his mind. But I don't know how much the general manager could, other than maybe a letter saying that we're pushing his name in nomination. That might be useful.
Director Akbari, if I may.
Yes, Director
Can I
Hong.
ask a question of council? How far can we go with this?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I was just trying to look at the Aqua JPIA rules for this process, and it doesn't really address this. But what I can say is that the board has before it right now a resolution that you're either going to approve or not approve. And assuming that that resolution is approved, that's a pretty strong statement that the board supports the nomination. And then looking at the Aqua JPIA nomination procedures, it does authorize the candidates to submit statement of qualifications. I'm sure that Director Weed is familiar with these rules. And if he chooses to prepare a statement of qualifications along with this resolution, I think what your general manager proposed makes a lot of sense. And then I presume Director Weed would also take this packet of information to his contacts as well. I can look a little deeper with your general manager on whether there's any rules about reaching out, but I don't see anything in just the quick one-page handout that came with the form resolution, which your resolution is modeled after, and these rules.
John Weed, let me suggest that the potentially better protocol, since this is a decision made by the board and by other boards and what they would do, that it might be from the board itself, possibly the president of the board, writing a letter on behalf of another board member, as opposed to the general manager contacting other general managers saying that one of my directors wants this job. I think it puts a bit of a burden on the general manager to make that decision and promoting it, because it really is a decision of the board. And I would suggest that a letter from the board or board president to the other districts and addressed to their board president may be more appropriate.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, we got the item 5.8 resolution here. I have no problem with the board president sending out letters stating that, this evening we nominated Director Weed, or, today, whatever, we nominated Director Weed and he agreed. And I think at that point, we probably could have the statement or any statements you wanted to apply, John, attached to it. We're doing the resolution. So yeah, we could have Director Akbari as the board president put a letter to this and put it out to those other districts as, yes, we have a candidate in this race, and this evening we nominated him and here's his statements. I think that's fine.
I support that idea.
And I'm happy to put forth a letter and send that to the other agencies for nomination.
Thank you.
I'll request Director Weed some input from you to highlight the points that you wish to be highlighted.
I have a task tomorrow. Thank you.
Wonderful.
I'd like to move 5.8. He hasn't said no yet, so
real quickly, Director Gunther, before we do that, I just want to open it up for public comment. Are there any members of the public who wish to ask a question or make a comment? Seeing and hearing none. All right, Director Gunther, it's all you.
Okay, finally, I'd like to move item 5.8, resolution nominating Director Weed for the executive committee of the Aqua JPIA.
And I'll second before he changes his mind.
Roll call, please.
Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
All right,
Huang,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Congratulations, Director Wade. And I look forward to hearing some positive news. With that, I believe we have finished tonight's action calendar and we'll move on to item 6, reports, and we'll start with item 6.1, board committee reports. Is there any director or member of the public who wishes to ask a question or make a comment on any board committee reports? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to item 6.2, operational reports. Are there any directors or members of the public who wish to make a comment or ask a question on any of our operational reports?
President Akbari, if I may, Ms.
Yes.
Heides, our manager of water resources, has a quick statement to make about item 6.2.2, the water production report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Shaver. The water production report, staff wanted to note for the board that a corrected version of this report, which is on page 287 of the board packet, was prepared and posted yesterday on the district's website and emailed to the directors. And the corrected version will be incorporated into the minutes for tonight's meeting. In making updates this month to the way the graphic is generated, some information didn't translate over properly into the version that was included in the board packet. So this has been corrected and we just wanted to note the change for the board and the public. So, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
And we also wish to thank Director Sethi, who found it with his eagle eye.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Director Sethi. Do we have any questions or comments on 6.2.2 or any of the other operational reports?
I'd just like to make a quick comment that there's good news. It is raining in Union City as we speak.
Wonderful.
And in Mission San Jose, South Fremont.
Actually, I have a question on the
Yes.
report. I thought Director Gunther would have mentioned that we have really soft water. But my question is, I actually noticed the water hardness in South Fremont went up. What gives? What's the cost?
Our manager of operations and maintenance, Kurt Arens, might have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the report now. There's nothing significant change in operations. Again, that area is mostly TP2, I believe.
Okay.
So it's going to be Delta supplies varying.
Yeah, normally North Fremont and Union City water is much harder than South Fremont. This month I noticed it's kind of flipped, that we actually have softer water. So I'm just wondering what's different. Is there a changing operation? Are we maximizing desal output? Or I just got lucky this month?
Winter flows are down, and actually TP2's in the process of ramping down, but this is a monthly average, so there's no major changes in last month. But I'll look into it and let you know if there's something specific going on.
All right, thank you. It's just an
Thank you.
out of curiosity question. I just noticed something unusual, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe I saw a member of the public put their hand up in the Zoom app, Ken N.
Yes, President Akbari, I think Director Huang beat me to the punch. I was just going to congratulate the district in getting their hardness levels down overall, and specifically in the North Fremont and Union City area. I think this is a step in the right direction, and I encourage the district to keep up their good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments before we close out 6.2? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 6.3. I don't believe we have any staff presentations unless the general manager says otherwise.
That's correct. We do not have any staff presentations except under item 6.4 when we get to that item.
Great. Yes, let's move on to 6.4, and we'll start with 6.4.1, update on the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you. We've been providing monthly updates for the board regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, and I just wanted to review some information for you, talk about the operating environment since we last met at our regular board meeting in January, a little bit about the current operational status of the district and kind of where we're going. Next slide, Andy. So our objectives, as they have throughout the pandemic, have remained the same, and that is to keep our employees safe, continue providing the essential services that we do, prioritize the most critical in the event that we have resource limitations, and support our employees and their families that are experiencing various issues and challenges as a result of the pandemic. Next slide, Andy. The good news to share is that conditions statewide and regionally are improving. You can see from these ICU capacity numbers that it is much improved from the last time that I presented information to the board, and specifically in Northern California, or 29%, which is much better than the less than 1% that we were experiencing at the height of the post-holiday surge. Next slide. That said, vaccinations are rolling out. Unfortunately, it appears that the state is changing its approach, as was mentioned at our last update in January. It appears that while things are still in flux, that the state will go to a complete age-based system in terms of vaccination prioritizations once the state and the county finishes phase 1B, which is the phase that's currently underway. As a result of concerns expressed by at least one or two of you, I did work with President Akbari, and we sent letters to the governor and the Board of Supervisors of Alameda County, as well as the associated health departments, that we believe that essential frontline water workers, while we don't want to cut in line necessarily, we did want to express to them that we have had our own outbreaks here, and that we're concerned, and we hope that they consider that as they continue developing their vaccination priority plans. Next slide, please. One thing that I did want to mention is to give you some recent statistics about where we are on vaccinations. You can see things were ramping up, approaching the new year, but then there was vaccination dose shortages, and things ramped up again. And a lot of vaccination doses are on their way, specifically, about 170,000 or so were scheduled to be delivered and hopefully shot into people's arms this week. So the news that we're hearing is that the vaccination program should be ramping up again. For our part, we did encourage employees to sign up for what's called My Turn. You can go to the website noticed on this slide, which lets you input some data about yourself. And it does have water and wastewater workers identified in that data. So that's encouraging that maybe there will be an opportunity for our own essential workers. But the idea is that you will be informed depending on where you are in line once your turn is up. And then the site even allows you to make appointments. So this is something that we're obviously monitoring closely, because we're really not going to be out of the pandemic until there's a wide distribution of vaccinations. Next slide, please. In terms of our current operating status, Unfortunately, we've had 4 more confirmed positive cases since I last spoke with you. So we're up to 14 total now out of the 236 authorized positions that we have. We are, as was mentioned earlier in the meeting, still in a dry weather pattern. And we continue to make plans assuming that the dry weather conditions will persist. And then also here with our own workforce, where we've seen some indications of kind of getting a little laid back on some of the PPE equipment, especially masks. And we've had some recent increased emphasis here at the district to make sure that our employees wear their PPE properly. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps, as I've mentioned previously, the assumption here at ACWD is we will continue maximizing teleworking until at least to the end of the fiscal year. And also in discussions with my peers, I believe that most agencies are looking at a hybrid approach once we begin opening up. We will continue working with our state and local health officers, and I'll give you an update when we get to our March regular meeting, and hopefully conditions continue to improve. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you may have.
Do we have any questions or comments from the board?
No.
Quick comment here. Comments.
Yes, Director Reed.
The CDC, I understand, is revisiting their past guidance and determining that the need to do antibody testing is becoming identified. Their estimate for the number of people infected was dramatically increased from 19 million in the US to 89 million recently. And they felt they missed the mark on that one. Second, even with the vaccine, it appears there's evidence or information that one can still be a carrier and transmitter of the COVID, so that the vaccine is protection for health purposes for the individual. The individuals also have family members that they need to be protected, and that with the increasing mutations of the COVID-19, it's suggested by some authors that this will be an annual injection similar to a flu shot. And that I encourage us, the district, to look into what the requirements would be for one, annual shots for the employees and their family as part of in conjunction with our flu vaccinations. And second, the ability to do more antibody testing of employees as well to determine if they've had the disease and hopefully which version of it they've had. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed. I don't take exception to anything that you said. We continue monitoring the guidance that we receive from the federal and state and local governments. And some of that guidance has evolved over time, but we're closely monitoring it and doing what we can to keep our employees and their families safe.
Thank you. I actually do have a question. So looking at the hybrid approach that is being considered by many agencies and by ACWD as well, can you talk to what parameters we're looking at in terms of who would be working on site versus who would be working off site? Is it age-based? Is it based on their specific role at the district? Can you kind of talk to how that would be decided?
Yeah, so maybe I wasn't clear, but until we feel that the pandemic crisis is over, at least my approach is that we will continue to maximize teleworking so that we can keep the employees that need to report to work each day as safe as we can, as well as not spread the disease anymore. The issue is more conceptual and philosophical, and that is, what will the workplace environment be like once the pandemic subsides? We have learned some things during this pandemic about employees working from home. That we've taken advantage of some technology that either wasn't widely used or we weren't familiar with it, or has evolved since the beginning of the pandemic. Are there efficiencies that we can implement? There are some employees that are dying to come back into the office. Well, maybe I shouldn't use that verb, but they really want to come back to the office because their work from home situation isn't how they would prefer. There are other employees who feel, hey, do I ever need to come back to the office? I'm kind of digging this non-commute experience. There are policy issues. Is it okay for employees that are public safety officers, like public safety employees like all of us at the water district can be? What's the maximum distance that we're okay with them, like living away from the office if we may have to call them in during some emergency? So by hybrid, I mean, there's some policy issues, there's some employee wants and considerations issues, there's legal issues. For example, if you have an employee working in a different state, there are some complexities with that we've worked with our attorneys on Hanson Bridget about because a question came up. So by hybrid, I think we're not going to go back exactly to where we were before the pandemic, but we're not going to likely stay maximizing teleworking. It's going to be something in between. We do have some alternate work schedules like 980, 410s now. My belief is that there'll be other potential schedules for employees that we will consider either because of operational efficiency issues, employee desires, or other reasons that are going to have to be worked out over the next months or years. So I hope that helps.
Understood. Yes, no, that was great. That was a great amount of information. The one request that I would make is, as we are considering what approach to take, it would be good to get some feedback from employees as well as to what their concerns and expectations are, and whether that's in the form of a survey, formal or informal. I think as the board approaches policy decisions as it relates to employee matters, it would certainly be good to get their feedback as well.
Understood. And obviously, many of these issues are significant policy issues that the board would be involved in as well.
I just have a quick comment.
Yes, Director Gunther.
I believe it was either today or yesterday. Salesforce basically announced that they're not going back to the way they were before, and it's going to be different. How different, they didn't say. I know other tech companies have already said this. So I know the city of San Francisco is really concerned because, they may be going into hybrid programs themselves, like Salesforce. They may be looking at a quarter of their workforce. So they didn't say that number, but I would expect them to be doing a hybrid too. So there's going to be a lot of this going on in the Bay Area. A lot of good examples, I suppose.
Thank you, Director Gunther. Any other questions or comments from the board or from members of the public?
John, I'll make one very brief one. The
Yes.
JPIA, when their report pointed out the significant financial impact to the JPIA was the number of several employees who had long-term serious medical needs that had been in ICUs for months. Those were extraordinary costs. When those costs were removed, the overall impact on the overall on their budget and cost were relatively what could be handled. So I would encourage us to keep that in mind and then encourage employees to get medical treatment as soon as possible and not allow it to go into that critical, long-term critical stage, which is where the real cost to the insurance and the district's long-term insurance are going to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed. With that, I believe we can conclude this item. General Manager, sorry, Bob, do we have more General Manager reports?
Yes, Ms. Heides has a relatively quick report on an exciting dry year transfer program development.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Staff wanted to just provide a brief update on this state water contractor's dry year transfer program. As the board is aware, last year the district participated for the first time in the state water contractor's dry year water transfer program and was successful in securing approximately 1,700 acre feet of water at a price of $350 per acre foot to bolster 2020 supplies, prepare for a potential second dry year, and minimize costs for customers by avoiding the purchase of more costly San Francisco PUC supplies. With continued dry conditions, the state water contractors is again coordinating a dry year transfer program in 2021 to negotiate agreements to purchase water from willing sellers. Staff is proposing to participate in the 2021 program to potentially purchase up to 4,000 acre feet of dry year supplies to supplement other available supplies. Since time is of the essence to make initial requests for potential participation in the program, under the general manager's authority, staff is planning to execute a dry year transfer agreement with the state water contractors before March 2nd and to remit an administrative deposit of $5 per requested acre foot of water, totaling $20,000 to be used for administration, environmental, and legal costs for any water purchase agreements that are executed through the program. This agreement does not obligate the district to purchase water, but allows us to keep this option open. In order to receive water that is ultimately secured through the program, the district and other buyers would need to execute individual water purchase agreements directly with any sellers, as well as agreements with the Department of Water Resources for storage and conveyance through state water project facilities. Commitments to execute these water purchase agreements, which obligate the district to actually purchase the water, would need to be made in the April-May timeframe. Staff would be coming to the board in that timeframe with information on the amount available, terms, and costs, and to request board authorization to execute any water purchase agreements that result from the program. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on this update.
Thank you, Ms. Heides. Do we have any questions or comments from the board?
At $350 per acre foot, is that not by far the least expensive water that we've encountered, including semi-tropic, and certainly less than the $1,700 or so that was suggested for Los Vaqueros?
It is a good price for the water. That's last year's price, so I can't guarantee you that will be this year's price.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, any questions or comments from members of the public? Hearing none. I believe, does that conclude 6-4?
We actually have one more quick announcement from Mr. Stevenson, very quick.
Okay.
Yes, very quick. Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Just wanted to let the board know that we are planning a virtual community information meeting related to our advanced metering infrastructure project. So we're getting ready to kick off the proof of concept phase. And so the community will see us out in the street doing those meter upgrades and the related work. And so we're doing a bit of outreach right now, letting folks know. And so I invite you all to attend the community information meeting, and that'll be on March 10 at 6 p.m. And we'll send some additional information along to the board shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. And I'm assuming you're going to need to know beforehand the number of directors that are attending, right?
That's a reasonable assumption, but what we're essentially planning to do is be ready to do a special board meeting. We'll notice the meeting as a special board meeting and prepare the agenda as though it will be.
Okay.
So we're not actually going to ask you to confirm in advance this time. So we're just going to be ready regardless as to what happens with regard to the number of board members present.
Great.
Yeah, and just
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson.
just to add to that, we've decided that in the virtual world, it is so especially easy to tune into these things. It's just better to go ahead and assume that the board will be interested. We've seen in the past, sometimes directors don't think they'll be able to attend, but then, you know, plans change and we're just a mouse click away. And wham, you're in a virtual meeting. So we just thought, at least in the virtual world, we'll just assume that from now on.
Appreciate it. Wonderful. Unless there's any questions or comments, I will conclude 6.4. And we can move on to item number 7, director's comments, reports on meetings attended, and agenda item requests. And I see 7.1 and 7.2 involve both Director Sethi and Weed. So Director Sethi, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I'll start here and I'll keep it brief. Every other month, we have a Alameda County Special Districts Association meeting of all the special districts in the county. And this was a pretty good one, very well attended. We had a fine presentation and from the host, which was the Livermore Valley Recreation and Parks District. It predates the formation of the city of Livermore. So it has different jurisdiction. And it was noted in the meeting in reference to N3 Ranch that their geographic topological jurisdiction extends all the way to the Alameda County, Santa Clara Valley border. So that's something to keep in mind here. They've gone through major cutbacks during COVID-19, and they not only support the parks and recreation in the area, but all the senior citizen facilities and other activities for youth in the community. So it's a very much of an overlap with the city, but they have the prior jurisdiction. So it was a very interesting presentation. We also had a legislative update, nothing that important to go into right now. On item 7.2, the Redevelopment Oversight Committee, where I am appointed or elected by the Special Districts Association, and Director Weed is elected as my alternate. The meeting was the annual meeting. It was about 1 hour. There were a couple of contentious issues regarding the city of Emeryville and city of Hayward, but the chief thing we had to get done was in December, we approved the resubordination of a loan to the city of Oakland on the Swans Marketplace refinancing that is in downtown Oakland. Other than that, everything was, just pretty normal business. I did request at a prior meeting that we have a history of redevelopment in the state of California, which affected all communities equally, written up so that future directors and elected people will have an understanding of what we went through in prior decades leading up to this redevelopment oversight committee and what its charter is in retirement of the prior redevelopment districts and city efforts. So once I have the final write-up on that, we did a review of it and a markup. I will direct it to the rest of the board because it is a pretty good write-up. Third, I have one very short report. We had the Cal DSAL meeting the last 2 days, and I just sent an email to Mr. Shaver and Board President Akbari. The best was left for last in the meeting. if you didn't hang on, and they were talking about all the emergency responses that we had in the state last year and how different districts responded to these events. And so it was noted that communications became a real problem when the battery and backup systems on the cellular network were going down. Regular communications was cut off. And so many districts have proactively put in place their own radio network. And I don't know whether we have one or not. Do we?
Yes, we do.
Okay, that's good to hear. And they were also talking about how they have to do regular practice exercises, that these are open airwaves to the public, that you have to follow certain protocols in communication so that employees are not saying something wrongfully on open air. But also noted, and the email I just sent was on AT&T FirstNet, which is becoming a first provider network for first responders and utilities with major backup batteries behind this separate cellular network and generators, so that if the cellular system goes down, this is the primary network and where the first calls in the cellular system will go to support utilities, first responders, everyone. And there was an enthusiastic support of this AT&T FirstNet by the spokespeople at the end of the conference. And I would request that we look into that and have a report back to the board, because we're going to be working with AT&T anyway on our AMI network. And this sounds, I briefly looked into it. You can just look up AT&T FirstNet on a Google search, and it looks like a very robust primary cellular system for utilities, cities, other first responders, hospitals, things like that. So I would ask us to look into that.
We will do that as part of our overall emergency response assessment effort.
Yeah, and if I could request a report back to the board, I'd really like to know if we're going to support something like that. We have a major earthquake in the community. This may be the most reliant communication system that we have.
Will do.
Yeah, and I second Director Sethi's request. I think that'd be interesting to come back to the board. Thank you, Director Sethi. We'll move on next to Director Weed.
Thank you. On the Special Districts Association meeting with Livermore made a presentation at Livermore Area Recreation District. And I was surprised to learn that they are not just the city, but the area. So the entirety of the N3 Ranch within Alameda County, 20,000 acres, are within the jurisdiction also of the Livermore Area Recreation Group. Next, on the Redevelopment Oversight Committee, this is something that's going to continue to go. There are several cities which are going to extend the redevelopment efforts. Emeryville appears to have transferred some toxic properties to the redevelopment agency prior to the dissolution of redevelopment and are using the continuing tax increment financing to cover the toxic cleanup, which has no end in sight. In Oakland, they, in addition to the long-term Swan Market agreement, and they have Fox Theater and other issues, they have been challenged by the state of California for using the redevelopment tax increment financing to cover legacy costs, past and future and present. And they've lost their first court case. It's under appeal. And they keep coming to this board to asking for support, which it gives them because they're fellow agencies. So that will be another cost factor that have. But it's one of those things that will just continue to work its way through the system, and we'll see what eventually happens.
By the way, Director Weed, you're just reminding me that I was the only director on the board that voted no on the Oakland issues because I sincerely think it's a waste of taxpayer money. They are spending millions of dollars to defend their court cases, going all the way up to the state appeals court and Supreme Court. They lose on every occasion, on each battle. They're wasting taxpayers' money. I express this to the rest of the board. And on behalf of the special districts that Director Weed and I represent, I voted no, even though it was disconcerting to Supervisor Carson and others that are close to the city of Oakland. I just had to register my frustration that you can't spend millions and millions of dollars of ratepayer, of taxpayer money and be in the wrong every time. And then the Department of Finance for the state of California is also saying that they are in the wrong, but they will not listen. They keep persisting. So this was my first no vote on this oversight committee, and I felt very strongly about it.
Thank you. I also went on Zoom to watch the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission workshop on the San Joaquin River unimpaired flows issue. I was astounded to learn from their presentation, and I encourage our staff to review it, because we're getting involved in the issues of voluntary agreements versus unimpaired flows, that for over 20 years, there's been no correlation between the flows and the number of fish using the San Joaquin River. It suggested two issues, and there's been an argument that that's not the case. It's also been seen in smelt in the Delta. And it suggested that the fish hatchery, particularly on the McCollum, and the releases at the mouth of the McCollum, and predation of the bass are responsible for the changes in the fish operations. So one of the very basis for much of the unimpaired flow argument was not there. When the environmentalists came on later for an NGO session, they were very candid that this was more of a cultural issue that involved a bigger issue, concerns related to the Delta and possibly even the tunnels, more of a quality of life. It's my understanding that San Francisco, we'll see where San Francisco comes. They've had a change in their leadership and whether they will change their position on unimpaired flows versus and support them, or with as did the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco unanimously before the mayor vetoed it. One of those members of the Board of Supervisors is now president of the PUC. That's in flux. But it comes down to the need to secure alternate water supplies. And I understand San Francisco is working with TID and MID to try and develop side contracts, much like the transfer agreements, analogous to the transfer agreements with state water contractors, where in dry years, they can obtain additional water that they own. And once again, I encourage ACWD to do the same and look toward purchasing and owning their water rights, much like I've always strongly encouraged us to be the owner of land and resources, including watershed. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed. Director Gunther and Director Huang, do you guys have anything to add?
I also monitored or watched, whatever you want to call it, the DSAL conference past couple days, and I do agree with Director Sethi's comments about the last item and that AT&T network. We already had the radios, which will help definitely. There were several presentations that were somewhat technical, but interesting in that there appears to be some, I don't want to use the word, they're not necessarily breakthroughs, but innovation that we probably want to keep our eye on. My assumption is that some of the staff did monitor this thing, Bob. Was that true? Because there might be some possibilities.
Yeah, I did attend some of the sessions, but unfortunately I was not able to attend them all.
They really were, they're looking very strongly at the brine issues as well as power. So there's a lot of movement in the industry to address those problems. It was a good conference.
If I can add to Director Gunther's comments, this is for Mr. Shaver. One of the latter presentations was from Congressman Mike Levin, who replaced Darrell Issa in Southern California. And he's an environmental attorney by background, a Stanford graduate. And I found it really welcoming how knowledgeable he was about desalination and its efforts. And he's a key sponsor of a $275 million bill in Congress right now to finance desalination efforts. And I wonder if we might write a letter in support of that congressional bill. I don't remember the exact number on it right now. It was not included in the latest infrastructure plan that's being put before Congress. And so he was appealing for some support. But even though we have an existing desal plant, there may be some opportunity for funding, for upgrades to our plant or something like that. But because we're a key provider of desalinated water in California, I think we should be a sponsor of that bill in support of Cal Desal.
I agree with Director Sethi. In fact, I think because we are and we've been running our system for so long now, our voice on that bill would be, I would think it would be desirable and effective. We know what it could do. Certainly, I think there also would be possibilities of getting money to look at some of the new emerging technologies in it. But the fact that we've been there for so long, we're doing it, we're operational, we've proven it works. I agree. I think it'd be great if we were on that and perhaps even writing our own legislators here in the Bay Area to tie on.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
Just a clarifying question. Would that comment in the form of a board resolution or a letter from the board president?
So what I would suggest is let me work with Wendy Ritterbush, the executive director of Cal Desal, and find out how ACWD can best, support that legislation to make more money available for desal. I need to also get more familiar with what the bill actually funds to see if there's any opportunity for ACWD. So I would suggest that we do that. And I just think we need to be a little bit careful because most of the desal in Southern California that's being envisioned right now, the ones that are really proactive are seawater desal plants. And, you know, they're not without opposition as well. And as we know, Southern California is different than the Bay Area. So I would just want to get a little smarter before diving in, you know, with both feet. That may not be an issue for this board, but I would at least want to know where the minefield is, and then sort of make a judgment call. So I got a little research that I'd like to do, and then if needed, I'll double back with the board president and vice president to make sure that I'm not straying from the path of righteousness.
And that actually, Bob, there were comments made in the session specifically about, you know, pushback on projects and the fact that a lot of that's based on false information.
Of course, but I also attended Mr. Levin's keynote speech, so I'm pretty familiar with what's being requested.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director Huang, did you have anything for item 7?
Nope, nothing from
No?
me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just make a quick comment. I think many of us are aware of a hacking attack that took place against the water district in Florida. And so I did shoot a note to our general manager, and I saw that Director Sethi did as well. And I believe we'll be reviewing some security policies in closed session as a board in a month or two. So I just wanted to make the public aware of that as well, that we are looking into that situation, and we'll be updating our policies as needed.
And by the way,
Yes.
there was an attack on the Israeli national water system last year. And so they have volunteered to help out in that Florida situation because of their expertise in tracking down the hackers. In the case of Israel, somebody was hacking in to increase the chlorine levels to poisonous levels. Here it was the sodium hydroxide that they were increasing. And you know, this is a much more serious case than I think the news has reported, because they're focused on other issues. But this was done on the Friday before the Super Bowl, as all the fans were arriving into the hotels surrounding Tampa Bay. And you can imagine if the operator, who was a real hero here, had not caught what was going on in real time, we could have had tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people ill, a national disaster 2 weeks into a new presidency like 9/11. We have to take these kind of issues seriously as a water industry and protect our reservoirs and open surface water supplies. This is a very, very serious situation. And I wrote in a reply email to Mr. Shaver that, you know, we have to be on guard for copycats and for people that will try to ransom districts for money over these kind of issues. And everyone needs to be on high alert in the water industry.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. Well, I think that concludes item 7. So we're going to move into item 8, the closed session. Bear with me, I'm going to read through the items. So our first closed session, item 8.1, pursuant to California Government Code section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. Agency designated negotiators are Robert Shaver, Jennifer Solito, Jonathan Wunderlich, and Stacy Q. Employee organizations are the Operating Engineers Local 3 and ACWD Operators Association. Item 8.2, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.8, conference with real property negotiators. The property under consideration is the N3 Cattle Company, consisting of 131 parcels and approximately 50,535 acres in Alameda County, Santa Clara County, San Joaquin County, and Stanislaus County. Assessor's parcel numbers were furnished by the owner's representative and are attached to the agenda. Agency negotiators are Robert Shaver and Ed Stevenson. Negotiating parties are the N3 Cattle Company, LLC, Wren Jr. and Wren Jr. Trust. Under negotiation are the price and terms of payment. And item 8.3, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957, public employee appointment, title General Manager. And with that, I'll ask the district secretary to move us into our closed session.
You got it, President Akbari. I'm opening the room right now.
And can we take a little break?
Absolutely, yes, once we're in closed session.
Good job, Andy.
Okay,
Great. And Andy, could you pull up the agenda, please?
sure.
Wonderful. All right. It is 11:02 and we are reconvening out of closed session. So reporting back on the items from the closed session, item 8.1, direction was given to our labor negotiators. Item 8.2, direction was given to our real property negotiators. And on item 8.3, no action was taken. And with that, at 11:02, I will adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much. Good night.